Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. Time to appreciate great OSTs and the games they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. But Joe, what are we actually doing on this week's special episode?
Well, just like last year, we kind of want a low-key week during the week of American Thanksgiving, which is this week. And so we are going to record a laid-back little Q&A episode. And it'll be fun.
Yeah, pretty casual. You've sent in questions, listeners out there, and we want to answer. Some are very focused on game music, some not as much. And we just kind of wanted to cover all the gamuts. I mean, we liked doing last year's Thanksgiving Q&A. We'll do it again this year.
Yeah. So, I guess like we did last year, we'll just trade off who is reading the question, and then whoever didn't read the question goes first with their answer. All right. I will start then with a question from Major Moses. It is, who would be your dream interviewee?
I feel like when we wrote our little notes down here, we have one Japanese composer, and there may be challenges there, and then there's one who speaks English. For me, it would be Shoji Meguro, for all of the music he does in the Persona series and the other games that he's been involved with. I would love to know like his processes and what he uses to record and things like that, because it's just the catchiest music out there, and I love revisiting it. But probably my favorite composer overall out there is Austin Wintory, so he would be another one that I feel like would be a very fascinating interview.
Yeah, both of those I would absolutely adore to interview. On my side, my English-speaking one, I mainly just want to interview him because I think it would be a fun interview, but that would be Grant Kirkhope. Like, I think interviewing Grant Kirkhope would be a blast.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
He seems like a fun dude. But for the composer that I would give my life, sell my soul to the devil to interview, would with a bullet be Yoko Shimomura.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
Yeah, that makes sense for you. Absolutely.
I would die for that. Like, she is my favorite composer currently working in the industry, just bar none. And I'd love to interview her. I don't think she speaks English.
Some very good choices, certainly. Major Moses also asks, what's the most surprising fact you've learned in your research?
So on my end, I mainly interpreted this question as like this year, because I don't remember most things we talked about last year.
Also, Cuphead, Christopher Madigan, his first composition, that may be hard to top.
Oh, yeah, that's just the winner.
Yeah.
That's just the winner. Like, But for this year, I really, really liked learning about the time signature shenanigans in Thumper, and how like the time signature increases to reflect what stage it is. I think that's really cool. It is not something I knew ahead of time. But I think by far the most surprising fact was the fact that Go Tell Aunt Rhody from Resident Evil 7 was arranged by the same dude who wrote the famous Gimme a Break Kit Kat jingle. I still have not fully processed that fact. Wow.
I also went through some of this year's episodes, remembering that for the Metal Gear Solid 5 episode, Ludwig Forsell mentioned that he wanted to create a Diamond Dog crew rap, but unfortunately did not have time for it. He mentioned how it even had finished lyrics. That may be my favorite. There were a couple others, though, that Shadow of the Colossus apparently played a big thematic role in the 2007 film Reign Over Me, to the point where Adam Sandler and Don Cheadle were experts at the game before arriving on set. And then when we talked about What Remains of Edith Finch, Jeff Russo, the composer there, he's the guitarist from the 90s rock band Tonic, with hits such as If You Could Only See. Yeah, did not know that, but that was a cool little discovery bit.
Yeah, that Diamond Dog rap is still
Oh, I want it so bad.
God, I wish.
Oh.
I wish we could see it. Oh, I want to see it. So, this is actually a question that I wanted to bring because I'm very interested in answers on this one. If you were given an infinite budget to create any internet show of your choice, what would you end up creating? And what about a one-shot type project with the same sort of budget stipulations?
My dream internet project, if I had endless time, means whatever. I am a big fan of the sports debate TV program over here called Pardon the Interruption. I think it's classic debate format about something where the two hosts are very passionate and it's recapping whether it's the days, whether it's the week, whatever, the current sports news. And it's this perfect banter, and in a half-hour show format, it's just perfect. I can't begin to imagine why games don't have something similar, recapping game news and, debates about game news. So that would be my choice. It's something I've tried to make happen for years, and then different things have come up that have gotten in the way, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a project you've tried to get off the ground a couple of times now, in the time that we've been doing this show even.
Yeah. So it's just been mostly a time thing, to be honest. But that would be my choice. For a one-off thing, I always like the idea of piecing together with audio editing, doing audio dramas. So I don't know, doing something how cool would it be to just take a manga or something like that and getting different people cast and doing some sort of an audio book of something like a manga. I don't know. It may seem weird, but I like the idea of using audio editing and making something like that.
I think that would be a lot of fun. I've put thought into doing an audio drama before, but it's a lot. That's a lot of work.
Oh yeah.
But I'd love to do that sometime. So when one of us gets into that, we know to give the other one a call. In terms of my stuff, I've mentioned it on this show before, actually. In terms of a show, I would love to have a YouTube channel where it's just live performances of game music. Essentially what the 8-bit big band does, but more with a style closer to Goose House and what they used to do, which was they were just in a room with their instruments and they just played a song and they sang a song. And honestly, what the infinite budget would really be for would be if there were vocals, I would want to get as many of the original vocalists as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And get Lotus Juice in there to do Mass Destruction live. That sounds awesome. I would love to do something like that. In terms of a one-off, this is one that will actually legitimately never happen. But boy, I have always wanted to make a 90s style Disney musical. This will absolutely never happen because I don't know anybody in the animation world and I don't know how to write music. But oh man, it'd just be so fun and so neat.
I remember you even talking with me about this kind of idea. I'm it'd be so cool. Would love that.
Yeah, I think I pitched one to you back in the SMYN days about doing an SMYN musical, and it was, I believe my plan back then was oh yeah, we'll just co-opt Disney songs, which probably would have been super illegal, but
just change the lyrics,
Yeah, I guess just changing the lyrics would fix it up. I don't know. I'd love to do something like that sometime.
Oh, but I think one of the songs you mentioned for that, if I remember correctly, was Friends on the Other Side from Princess and the Frog. Oh, it would be so cool. Would love that.
It'd be so good. There we go. We're going to combine the audio drama with the Disney thing, and it'll just be an audio drama musical.
There you go.
We got this.
This is a repeat question from last year's show, but, kind of bringing it into this year with all the episodes we've done. What has been your favorite game to talk about so far in 2020? And what's your favorite game that the other person has brought to the table?
So for me, the two favorites that I have brought to the show this year are probably Thumper is up there. I really, really liked talking about Thumper, more than I expected to. I'll be real. Thumper was kind of a weird choice to bring to the show, but I think it worked out way cooler than I thought it would. But I think my absolutely favorite soundtrack that I brought to the show this year was probably Where the Water Tastes Like Wine. I think that learning more about that game was really interesting, and it's got a really neat soundtrack that I feel like not a lot of people have heard. So I was happy to bring that along. In terms of games you have brought, I think the two that stand out to me the most are Tetris Effect, because, I mean, come on. It's Tetris Effect, baby. That soundtrack's so good. But also, I surprisingly really, really enjoyed learning more about Assassin's Creed Black Flag, mainly because sea shanties are cool.
Ah, yeah, no, they sure are, and that's a big part of that game. I think you and I interpreted this the same kind of way, and it was like, what was our favorite to talk about? Not necessarily like, oh, out of the games you talked about, what's our favorite to play? Like, no, like, as far as talking about these on the episode. So I really liked learning about Ori and the Blind Forest and talking about that soundtrack. I think that was coupled with that I had played and beat that game the week before. Like,
in fact, I think you finished it the day we recorded.
Yeah, it was probably within the hour of when we recorded. I rolled credits. So I feel like that one was fresh and it made for a better experience to talk about that. And for me to rediscover just how great Astrobot Rescue Mission soundtrack was and learning more behind that game. I feel like that was a really special one too. I definitely liked that one as well. I agree with you. You bringing up Where the Water Tastes Like Wine was fantastic. I feel like not only learning about a niche indie game like that, but a project that people that we know or have met are personally connected to it. I feel like that made it a really special one. I really appreciated that. And then also the amazing story of Final Fantasy XIV, also made for a great episode with learning about A Realm Reborn and things like that. I mean, the soundtrack, I feel like Masayoshi Shokin is amazing, but it wasn't really the soundtrack in that one that stood out so much to me. It was the amazing story of that game.
Yeah, that game has probably one of my favorite development stories in the entire industry. So I would agree with that 100%. That was probably the star, as much as I absolutely adore that soundtrack. It's so good. This is another question from Major Moses. He asks, if you were doing a podcast for movies instead of video games that would get pulled down off of YouTube immediately, what movie soundtrack would you start with?
When I first thought of this, Inception came to mind. And I think it'd be really interesting to like go in depth about how La Vie en Rose is slowed down to create the bwah, bwah sound that Hans Zimmer made. Learning things like that would be really cool. And that's just a film soundtrack that stands out to me. Like also The Dark Knight. I mean, more Hans Zimmer stuff. How have we not talked about Hans Zimmer yet on this show for video games? One day we'll get there for sure. But then I also thought to kind of break away from Hans Zimmer a little bit for a first episode, let's go Star Wars. Let's go episode 4, A New Hope. Let's get that John Williams score in there. A classic, a standout. I feel like either of those would be good starters.
Those are very good picks. But for me, I had a windmill slam answer immediately upon seeing this question, which is I would open with Klaus Badelt's score for Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl.
And let's be completely honest, you had this already written down. I mean, that would be my slam dunk choice as well, but I wanted to answer something different, so there.
It's, in my opinion, one of the best film scores ever written. It's so, so, so good. I adore it. Pirates of the Caribbean. Like, I like Hans Zimmer's work on the later movies, but Curse of the Black Pearl has always just been the standout favorite for me.
Every single one is a banger. Not crazy about the Tiesto, he's a pirate remix at the end, but okay, fine. But yeah, wow. Will and Elizabeth is a great one with the all of that soundtrack. Wow.
Skull and Crossbones, Bootstraps. Oh, it's just such a good soundtrack.
On Twitter, Mantis_Kosa asks, if you could make a rhythm game for the music of any video game, so I guess in a way kind of like what Melody of Memory is doing with Kingdom Hearts or a Theatrhythm, what game or series would you choose for a rhythm game with the music of any video game?
So it's going to sound like I'm just saying this because I like the soundtrack, because my answer is Katamari. But the more I thought about it as I was trying to figure out an answer to this, question, can you imagine? It's like you have to pick the stuff up in the rhythm, and there are boost sections where you got to do the moving both sticks to go fast forward, and can you imagine? It would work really well, I think. I think Katamari would translate into a really, really neat and unique rhythm game, and I'm actually a little bit surprised they haven't tried it yet.
I think coming off of reviewing one, it definitely helps you with really understanding and coming up with ideas for the mechanics of that kind of game. For me, I just thought of, well, what's one that doesn't exist already? What's a big music library that I would personally love to play / make? Pokemon. Pokemon is drawing upon years and years and years of music. You could even take examples from all the different spin-offs. I think from music library alone, haven't given the mechanics any thought, but there's so much Pokemon music that you could draw from and just have a great killer lineup of songs.
Yeah, it's actually kind of shocking that doesn't exist already. Because Pokemon Company seems to want to shove Pokemon in literally anything they can.
Oh, and spin off any possible thing. Sleep? Sleep.
Yeah, like Pokemon Sleep exists, but there's no Pokemon rhythm game? What are you all sleeping over there? I guess you are. A question from DVD Smith. He asks, since they're unlikely to come up as subjects on the show, what are your favorite games whose OSTs are composed of entirely licensed music?
You're right, and exactly for that reason. For me, the immediate thought that comes to mind is either the Guitar Hero or Rock Band series, games that I loved playing in their heyday. Still would love to play if I still kept plastic instruments around the house. But if I had to pick one from either, Guitar Hero 3 was the standout for Guitar Hero. Not only was it going from the old covers to the actual songs, but that's just an amazing lineup. You just put through the fire and flames on that Critical 5 and you throw a few more. I mean, that's the standout Guitar Hero game for sure. And then for me, Rock Band 2. Rock Band 2 would be the one for Rock Band. Panic Attack by Dream Theater, a big standout on that one for me.
See, somehow Guitar Hero didn't even cross my mind, even though, yeah, that's the answer. But for me, the first game that came to mind was actually Saints Row the Third.
Oh, okay.
Because it has this really great use of music like Kanye West's Power, which is the only reason I kind of like that song, even though I don't really like Kanye West as a human.
It's a good song. It's a good song. You're okay to like it.
It's a very good song. And it also spawned one of my favorite inside jokes in our community, which was putting every game's finale to I Need a Hero.
Yes.
Because that's what that game's finale is put to. And it's so good, and it fits in almost every finale of any video game in the world. It's so good, and so when I think of licensed music in a game, I think of Saints Row the Third, immediately.
It's a good thought. That's a good thought. Let's swing back to just the overall podcasting side of things. Now, we've been both doing many podcasts for so many years now. I mean, for you, it's been about a decade. For me, even longer. Outside of a straight up quality increase, just getting better at talking on a microphone, what is the way that you think you've improved the most? That is compared to when you first started.
So I've been thinking a lot about this lately, and as much as I think it was still a lot of fun to do stuff like read the manual and that kind of thing, I feel like I've found a way to make my sense of humor a little less mean-spirited. I've sort of trained myself to stop like punching down, because you don't really want to like make jokes at people's expense.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like a lot of RTM was just being kind of mean, and I'm not super proud of that aspect. And so I'm kind of glad that I've outgrown that. Next, I got to work on not cursing so much. I don't curse on this show because we try to make this a PG show, but Smasterpieces, boy, drop a lot of F-bombs in that show. And I got to work on that. But yeah, I think that I'm just happy with how I've sort of grown in that way, though I'm pretty sure I still have like a ways to go.
I think that's just comes with getting older and being more observant around the world.
Less of an edgelord.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like just interacting more with people and just, growing as a person, being a better person. I think that just comes with it. For me, it's actually picking up and doing editing on shows. I think back to my early days of being a total novice at podcasting, and it was like, all right, what's the editing we do? Chop at the beginning, chop at the ending. We send it out. Oh no. Bad mistake. I'm sure that, like you and some of your older shows, it's like, that probably didn't make for some ideal content. So as of late, just getting more practiced at editing and, chopping it up to make it a nice, tight, easy listen. You still, keep as much of the content as you can, but there are some things where it's just like, if it's longer pauses or if something happens with a dog or things like that, it's like the audience doesn't need to hear that. So you just
or a train
at your place. Yeah. So things like that, I think that definitely helps. And then I'm so proud with this show, how we're coming up on almost 2 years and we haven't missed a week of this show. And I think that's a good testament to like the time management I've blocked out for it. Cause usually by this point you'd be like, can we go every other week or can we go monthly? And it's just like, no, I got it kind of down to a science. Good practice with time management, which is something I just overall struggle with in my life. So to, get better and better over time at that, I'm proud of that as well.
I think it's also a testament to just how much we enjoy doing this show, because usually at this point in a project, I'd just be like, all right, let's just get this over with. But I have not had that thought about this or Smasterpieces one single time since we started these shows. Especially this one, because you'd think I'd get like sick of doing this show very quickly. You'd think anybody would get sick of doing the show very quickly because it's every week. But no, I look forward to recording the show every single week. It's a highlight of my week when we do it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
For editing, like, I was editing Smasterpieces at the start, and then, oh boy, I'm so happy you agreed to pick that up. Like, oh my God. Because I was also having a lot of issues with like time management, and I was getting to this point where it felt like I was giving too much of my time to this kind of thing. Like, it genuinely felt like I was not allowing myself to have time for me. And that is something that I am currently working on. I don't think I succeed super hard on it, but that is something that, I think I could do better at. And it's good to hear that that's something you feel like you have improved on yourself.
Oh yeah. And especially when it comes to being in a relationship, and I'm coming up on 1 year with that, and it's going beyond my wildest expectations, and I'm so happy. But it's another thing where it's like, you need to make sure like that's a priority. Like that's a priority in your life. Like whatever podcast stuff, like that is not like total rear view mirror, but like you got to know where to balance that out. And I think to still continue that, and I'm happy with myself for succeeding in both, I guess.
Well, like what it comes down to is, as much as we would like to get paid for doing this show, we don't.
Yeah.
We don't.
Right. Yeah.
So like, there are more important things that need to take priority, and accepting that and not giving all of your time to this thing that is really fun to do, but you're not like making money off of it. So if you gotta like delay something by a short while, it's no skin off your back. It's fine. Like, we've had to delay releasing episodes until, like, the evening on Tuesdays sometimes. And, like, it doesn't hurt anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a deep question, but an important one.
So, for the next question, the show's been running for almost 2 years, and there have been multiple instances of both of you playing a game after the other had brought it to the show, which potentially opens the door for missed opportunities in terms of cutting room floor tracks for those games. Are there any you can think of that you want to give a shout out?
So I actually couldn't think of anything for where I went back and played something that you'd already covered. But I feel like I do have to address a couple tracks where either looking back on it, like, how did we miss that? Or people being vocal, like, how did you miss this? Looking back at the Chrono Trigger episode where we said then, and it's still true, it's probably the hardest list that we pulled together. It's such a phenomenal soundtrack. There are going to be tracks that, how could we leave this off? But I look back at it and I'm like, really? We didn't pick the Chrono Trigger theme for Chrono Trigger? How?
Some stuff had to get left on the wayside. That, I think, 100% that was still, that will never be topped as, like, the hardest Critical 5 I have ever had to put together.
I mean, and with both of us throwing in Cutting Room Floor, like, that was so difficult. But one that came up is, like, how did we miss Astral Observatory from The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask? It's a good song. It's really catchy, but yeah, that was one. It's like, maybe we could have considered that one.
Yeah, we both kind of dropped the ball on that. I actually forgot that track existed until I replayed it for Smash Pieces recently.
Do I like the Mayor's House song more? Yeah, I do, but yeah, fine. It's in the past.
For me, one song that I've gotten really into in the past year is actually from a game that was part of our very first episode, being God of War 2018. I really like the track Valkyries. Like, it's really, really good. And if we did that game again, that would definitely be one of my cutting room floor tracks. Like, wow, that song is good. And then also, I've become very attached to Ruse of Ooze from Cuphead. Like, really attached, and honestly, that probably would have replaced... I don't know which one that would have replaced on my cutting room floor tracks for Cuphead, but yeah, I really like Ruse of Ooze a lot. It's very good.
That's an interesting thing to think about. Like, yeah, what could we change if we, look back on certain ones here? Here's another repeat question from 2019. Have you gone back and played any of the games that the other host brought to the table that you hadn't played yet? So it's kind of similar to the last one, but like, have you gone back and played any of those games that the other person brought to the show?
Halo Combat Evolved and Castlevania Symphony of the Night are the only ones that spring to mind that I have played after you brought them to the show. And I played both of those this year. And in fact, there is a Masterpieces bonus episode about Symphony of the Night if you want to hear like my detailed thoughts on that game, which is, I don't think it aged as well as some people think it did, but I still think it's a pretty good game. So that was fun. Sadly, I am sad to report that The Messenger, Ori and the Blind Forest, and the Danganronpa series are still on my list to get to. And in fact, those first two are installed on my Switch, and the third one is installed on my PC still. I just haven't gotten to them yet. I'll get there, I promise.
I think you would love all three of those games. I'm just saying. For me, does Final Fantasy VII count since I played Remake this year? No, okay. All right, probably doesn't. I have Coffee Talk installed on my Xbox Series X, and I'm probably soon, with Game Pass, going to have River City Girls installed as well. So maybe I'll get to those as well. Valhalla, how have I not gotten to Valhalla yet? That's also sitting on my Switch.
I think you'll enjoy Coffee Talk. I'm not optimistic that you will enjoy River City Girls, but, I mean, Game Pass, it's there. Might as well give it a shot.
I got through Battletoads.
That's fair.
Because of Game Pass.
That is fair.
I think I might like River City Girls a little more.
So this is another question from Major Moses. He sent in a lot of questions. Jeez. Come on, Mose. He asks, what game soundtrack would fit best in your personal, everyday life?
Okay, I'm not going to say I'm like a secret agent or anything like that, but I have...
Well, yeah, you wouldn't say that out loud on the show.
Well, maybe I am then. Oh, you never know. I have vivid memories at college putting on my headphones, playing the Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty soundtrack, and having that fit way too well as far as like just good ambient music to walk about a city to, and just living in like an everyday life. So that's my choice that came to mind. It doesn't fit the sinister espionage kind of thing there, but it's such a good soundtrack from Harry Gregson Williams.
I'm going to take a cop-out answer, because this is the most cop-out obvious answer in the world, and I admit it, but Persona 4.
Yeah, sure.
Like, Signs of Love is still, like, to me, the song of being at home. So,
yeah,
it's my choice with a bullet.
That's a good one, and something I was considering as well before I went with MGS2.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised you didn't go with a Persona game.
Well, Persona 5 probably wouldn't have worked. Like, it's too jazzy, too upbeat. I think Persona 4 would have been the perfect choice. But again, you filled it in first, and so I wasn't going to steal your thunder. DVD Smith asks a question that says, I see a lot of debate for both movies and game OSTs that there isn't as many catchy themes as there used to be, with modern day composers instead opting for ambient or subdued orchestral background music instead. Do you think that catchy background music is endangered, or is this worry overblown?
I'll make my thoughts on the subject very clear. No, it's not endangered. There's still plenty of it. It's just, there's more variety now. That's what people aren't taking stock of. The reason why game soundtracks used to be all like really catchy melody-driven songs was because that was what you had to make. You didn't have a choice.
With all the track layers that were limited, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, especially back in the NES era when they were programming the music into the game, note by note. So yeah, it's not that that style of music has gone away, because I mean, like, just this year, I mean, I'd say Hades is really good. You've got the Persona 5 soundtracks. I mean, you have the Shantae soundtracks still.
You even have projects like, I would think, Doom Eternal, something like that, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Or Final Fantasy VII Remake, because like that's taking like the older style. But for something like Doom, like, yeah, you're going to have some tracks that are environmental, but some that are going to really drive a hard melody.
Yeah, and I think that's really what it comes down to is it's because composers have more freedom with what they can do now. That's why it appears as if there's less of one type, because for a long time, that one type was video game music.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. At the same time, though, I think it's not unrealistic to wonder that, because you do see a lot more environmental music, and oftentimes, depending on the game project, that's what fits best.
I mean, we just last week talked about Breath of the Wild.
Perfect example. And that's a soundtrack where, given the setup for the game, like you kind of need a little more environmental sounds, right? But at the same time, you're absolutely right. Like, because now we're being exposed to more games, more projects, different projects call for different music samples and music composition. So I don't think it's necessarily endangered, but because you are seeing a lot of environmental supporting music, it's not unreasonable to think that it might be. But I think it's just, it's a glut of music, a glut of projects out there. And as a result, you're seeing just a wider variety. I think you're absolutely right there.
Mm-hmm. So let's get into our last three questions, which all have pretty similar themes, honestly. The first one being, how are your top 5 soundtracks for the year looking so far?
Well, with next gen coming, this may change, certainly. But right now, I have number 5, The Last of Us Part 2. At number 4, I have Hades. Number 3, Ori and the Will of the Wisps. Number 2, Persona 5 Royal. And number 1, Final Fantasy VII Remake. I feel like these are all really strong soundtracks. Granted, it gets stronger and stronger, almost exponentially so, as you move up that top 5. And I think it kind of gives you an indication of some of the games that may appear in our top 10 at year's end.
Mm-hmm. I agree that some of the games that have come out last week, or 2 weeks ago, I guess now, are probably going to change up this order. I have a feeling that Miles Morales is probably going to be up there from what we heard from that one gameplay demonstration. I haven't played it yet at time of recording. That's why I don't know yet. But for right now, at this exact moment, my top 5 consists of number 5, Shantae and the Seven Sirens, number 4, Spiritfarer, number 3, No Straight Roads, number 2, Hades, and number 1, also Final Fantasy VII Remake. Just going to take an act of God to pull that one off of number 1.
I mean, it's just been an amazing year for soundtracks overall. There's so many that we have listed in our document. It's going to be real tough whittling it down. We may even have to whittle down honorable mentions. Just can't have there be too many,
Because there might be like 20 something if we don't do that.
Oh, yeah, that's a little scary. Speaking of 2020 games, how are those 2020 game release backlogs looking?
So, I own and still need to play... Well, I don't own one of the games on this list yet because it's like $35 and I've already dropped enough money on games. But for the most part, I own but have not played yet Ghost of Tsushima, Necrobarista, Murder House, Yakuza Like a Dragon, Bug Snacks, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, The Pathless. I bought Phasmophobia, but have nobody to play it with at the moment, even though Matt watched a stream of it and was like, okay, yeah, I see how this is 500% your thing. I was like, yes, play it with me, please.
Sure.
I have not bought it yet, but I am also very interested in Visage, which is one of the 2 high-profile games that were like, oh, so PT is gone. Let's just make PT. So.
I mean, if no one else is gonna, yeah.
That's really all I got. Most of those, like, I've probably started by the time this episode goes out. I just probably haven't finished any of them yet.
Fair. So for me, I started Doom 2016. I really should continue that. And I do want to try Doom Eternal, available on Game Pass for Xbox, especially now on Series X. Getting Watch Dogs Legion through a GameFly rental for Series X. I really liked Watch Dogs 2. I'm curious how Legion is different, especially with the, I know it's optional for the permadeath, but I kind of want to try it with the permadeath. PlayStation 5 came out, so I'm starting with Assassin's Creed Valhalla on it, but then I need to get to, at time of recording, Astro's Playroom for sure. Definitely Spider-Man Miles Morales. I'm so excited for that. And you get Bug Snacks free on PlayStation Plus, so I might as well give it a shot. Everyone's going to be talking about it. I also want to try Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity because I liked Hyrule Warriors and it's Breath of the Wild. It's really good, but yeah, probably need to save some money on games. And then who knows if Cyberpunk 2077 is going to happen December 10th or if it's going to get pushed to the next year, but maybe by year's end, I'll have tried that one as well.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of optimism that game's coming out in 2020. and luckily, I have no skin in that game. I have no interest in Cyberpunk 2020, but personally, I don't think that game's coming out this year. For our last question, this one's a look into the future of original Soundchat. It's, what are some games that you are expecting to talk about in the near future? Near future meaning somewhere over the next 3 months.
So I'm going to be talking next week. I'll just say it. Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the game. I feel like I kind of slated it for this week here in particular. I don't know when it's going to release, especially at time of recording, but they're trying to get it out right by the end of the year. The bringing it back to consoles. Wow. But that's such a great soundtrack and needs to be talked about. Also, Portal 2 is begging to be talked about. How have we not done that game yet? Beyond Two Souls and Lauren Balfe's work there is one that I've kept pushing back a couple times because other games came up that are like, no, I need to talk about that this week. I think Her Story comes to mind. Like I had Beyond Two Souls slated for Her Story, and then it's like, oh no, need to talk about this game now after just playing it. So need to get to that one for sure. And then I reminded myself about Pokemon trading card game. And once we have a little more room from some of the Pokemon games you've been talking about, that is actually one of the best Game Boy soundtracks, period. So I am so excited to bring that one eventually to the show.
I'm looking forward to pretty much all of those, especially what we're going to do with trading card game, because that sounds... Especially the game it's matched up with, I'm very excited to talk about, but just that game coming to the show in general, that's going to be a lot of fun. I've never played it.
It's a deep cut. It's a deep cut.
It's a very deep cut. On my end, within the next 3 months, I will be talking about Journey. It's taken so long to get there.
Yeah.
We have been talking about how we should probably do an episode on Journey for since day one of the show.
As soon as we talked about a game with Austin Wintory composing. Yep.
Yeah. So Journey is coming. It's going to be sometime in the next couple weeks. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, which is one I alluded to when we talked about Evelyn Fisher for Donkey Kong Country. Because I should have talked about David Wise in that episode, but we had mentioned that there was a different game that we would want to cover David Wise with, and that's The One. So that'll be happening soon as well. What a good soundtrack.
Oh, yeah.
A Short Hike. Surprisingly good soundtrack. Very excited to bring that game to the show. It's surprisingly delightful. And then I'm so pumped to finally have a chance to talk about Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright. One of my favorite 3DS soundtracks.
That soundtrack is so good, for sure.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to bringing that. So we've got some good stuff coming up from now to February and probably hopefully past that. But who knows what the world will look like at that point.
Well, we can hope that it's a different presidency actually taking root in the United States. Well, until then, that will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat in this special Thanksgiving Q&A episode. You can find me on Twitter at Pete Speakeasy. Joe is over at The Debaga. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, also at rhymeswithasia.com. But it's that MP3 podcast version that you want, hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. That's where Joe's other podcast, Masterpieces, is hosted. And you can find that show and this show on podcast services all around the globe, wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify. Not only do we have the Spotify podcast feed available there, but we have a Spotify playlist. Go check that out. If we've ever talked about a game, music, song on this show and it's on Spotify, it's on that big playlist. Then you can find us on social media at Soundchat OST to give us some feedback and let us know what games you'd like us to cover in the future. And then also we're working on some bonus tracks. I mean, this is a nice one to do, but still more content coming your way. Spoiler warnings, best ofs, even more good stuff like that. Important to touch on, Joe, here as we kind of take a little pause here. We should probably mention, how should we handle repeat composers in the coming year?
Yeah, so here's the thing, everybody. We have somehow managed to not repeat a single composer in almost 100 episodes. But we both kind of came to the agreement of like, we're going to have to start repeating some next year. Like, for sure. We'll still try as hard as we can to avoid repeating composers, but I think we're going to sort of drop the idea of like, well, I can't do this game. We've already talked about this composer. And so the question we have for you guys is, how should we handle that? How should we handle it if it's a composer we've already talked about? Like, if Peter, for instance, brought Banjo-Kazooie, well, we've already talked about Grant Kirkhope. How should we do that? We're kind of looking for suggestions, because to be perfectly honest, I have no idea.
And I think it's easier for modern games where it's like actual humans performing, because then we can like pick a notable musician. I think, to be a little transparent here, that's kind of what we're going with for Journey. Journey, obviously composed by Austin Wintory, but Tina Guo is a cellist who her solos are a big highlight of the soundtrack. So let's investigate and learn about Tina Guo. Like, I think when it comes to more modern games, that's a reasonable solution. But you're right. When it comes to Banjo-Kazooie, like, how have we not talked about that game? Well, it's because, yeah, you talked about Donkey Kong 64. That's Grant Kirkhope. It's at a time where that's, on a sound card. That's on, the N64 MIDIs, essentially. And that's not any live musician or performer that you can tie to. So,
or like, we can't really talk about any other game that Koji Kondo was the head of.
Or like the only composer of, yeah.
Yeah, like, because we've gotten lucky with some of the older games that Koji Kondo worked on that there were like Majora's Mask. There was a second composer on that game. But we need a game plan if we're going to start doing that, and we kind of don't have one. So we're opening it up for suggestion from you guys. We'd like to know, how would you like us to handle repeat composers?
So yeah, reach out to us on our Twitter accounts at Peak Speakeasy, at The Dobaga, or on the show's social media at Soundchat OST. We would love to hear from you. Joe, who are we talking about next week?
I will be talking about Akitaka Toyama.
I will be talking about Anna Managuchi.
Yeah.
Oh yes. Finally, about time. So excited. All right, Joe, let's play us out.
So, just like last year, I guess this song's just going to become a tradition, because I just think we both forgot to replace it on the outline. And you know what? No, this fits.
It works. It works.
We are going to, as with last year, play out with the Brawl remix of Shabiru DS Cooking Navi. It's a song about cooking. Well, it's not a song about cooking, but it's a remix of a cooking guide game. You get what we mean.
It's arranged by Toshiyuki Sudo. And you know what? When it's all about food for American Thanksgiving, I think it fits. Thanks so much for listening this week on Original Sound Chat. We'll see you next time. Take care.